Good afternoon, all. My name is Sophie Hooper. I'm the Head of Policy and Research at IWFM, speaking from a very cold Cambridgeshire today. Welcome to our webinar with our partner Planon on how to achieve digital maturity. But this week, we've got a few celebrations to talk about first. Tomorrow is our 5th anniversary as IWFM, and today is our 100th Navigating Turbulent Times webinar. And as you see, while we did webinars before, the series ambitions was to support our members during the lockdown, and it's been pretty well welcomed by its followers since that day in 2020. It has provided us also with an opportunity to share with our members and beyond to talk about the many collaborations we have in place with partners. Topics have been very varied, from leadership over building safety and net zero, and many more, as you can see. But back to today. As I already alluded to, the aim of today is to introduce our new guidance notes supported by Planon, a digital maturity pathway for smarter organizations. I hope you can all see what we did there. We are joined by a fabulous panel that will share its insight and experience towards achieving the numerous benefits. We'll consider what the data journey looks like, how businesses can assess and analyze their digital maturity, including the role of the information model, the business case for adopting technology best practices, gaining a competitive edge, and the importance of data-driven strategies to securing positive business outcomes. We can all think of a few good business outcomes that we would like to see in place. Now, the running of this session is that Gordon Mitchell, the technical author of the guidance note, will briefly present the new guidance, diving into its methodology and the journey and the matrix on how to align your organization's operating model with the management system standards of ISO 41001 and IWFM's own professional standards framework. And this approach will then allow you to assess progress and outline next steps in the roadmap. After the presentation, Eric will join us for the conversation, during which we will also be running some polls. And Eric has got a really important poll going on today in his home country of the Netherlands. So we are a very international audience today. And as far as the audience is concerned, I would like to encourage you to ask questions throughout. So whenever they pop into your mind, please put them in the Q&A box. We will pick them up and discuss them after the presentation, but the Q&A box is the place to put them, not the chat. And like all platforms, you will be able to ask your question anonymously if you would prefer to do so. Now, I've done quite a bit of talking. Eric, can I please ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Sophie, for having us here in this 100th session. It's a great honor to be here. Yeah, my name is Eric Jaspers. I've been on January next year, it will be 25 years ago that I joined Planon Software. So I've been educated as a mechanical engineer, but went into IT with Philips Electronics beforehand. And since, let's say approximately 25 years, have been always involved in Planon's product development, product management, nowadays doing product strategy and innovation for the company, at least being involved in that, and basically having an extensive background in working in this field in the meantime, I would say. So in short, that's it, I guess.
Thank you, Eric, and we'll make sure to put your experience to the test. Gordon, may I please ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi all. Gordon Mitchell. I'm a co-founder of a new software ethics and AI platform called Holus. Also the IWFM Special Interest Group Chair. And I also have a convener role with ISO in terms of international standards with our 54 country membership. And I am the convener of digital data and technology there. So looking forward to today's session and the conversation with yourself and Eric.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gordon. And the floor really is yours.
Okay, so hopefully I can steer. So when we first looked at the digital maturity, it's such a complex initiative and possibly one of the most return of investment orientated if you get it right. We know from the beginning of this series, it's its 100th episode today, but back when we this all started, pre the pandemic, the statistics for getting that return on your innovation and digital initiatives were really, really poor. And more often than not, that's not because of the technology. I think as we've now got to 2023, almost 2024, that's even more so the case. So when we started looking at digital maturity, it may seem a little bit backward in coming forward, but we actually wanted to walk away from the tech. So clearly the digital platforms, the data that's generated, these things were obviously what's involved in the maturing process, but it was very deliberately taken to orientate around the operational structure and framework so that then it was agnostic to whatever underlying technologies we may be dealing with. And this way you could live with the model, you could apply it to whatever facility management operation you had, and therefore you could really sort of take control of the digital, of the technology, and of the data and align it to really what your operation A looked like and B needed. So a little bit, if I was to summarize it in one statement, we want to be data driven, not driven by data. So in that instance, the first place naturally to start was the IWFM PSF Professional Standards Framework. And what you can see on the screen just now, possibly familiar to lots of you anyway, is the current PSF framework. Admittedly, it's a little small on my screen, but on the left-hand side, you can see the entire framework as it's split into its 4 core areas with its then subdivisions. And on the right-hand side, you can see the particular technological breakdown of how the PSF deals with the different types of digital requirement to to really evolve and progress in a very integrative fashion the way that you mature and the types of technology that you use on that journey. So that gave us, I guess, a starting point, somewhere to start to build from, but also something that ultimately every one of our audience has an FM practice. So if we knew where we could start, then where were we going? And this part of the process is, again, to get good sustainable transformation to occur, you need to really communicate, which again is not about the tech, but it's about the journey. And this communication is both a top-down and a bottom-up affair. You need to start with, at the very beginning, with a clear objective of what you're actually trying to achieve. So often in the programs that fail to get a return of their initial investment, it's because people are drawn in by a particular piece of kit, but it's not necessarily aligned to the operating model. So it may promise a revolution of outcome, but by whom? If it's not an augmentation to the operational practice, then sometimes you can find your people fighting against the tech rather than benefiting from it. So at the very, very outset, this was about giving the tools to correctly communicate and in what order to make sure that you both have a very defined place you're trying to get to, but you also have a very strong way to communicate that progress and to take everyone on that journey. So the first two here is all about starting with that clear vision and understanding who is of consequence to what you're trying to achieve. And in that way, you then have a very clear way to communicate what you're trying to do in the right way to the right audience members of that larger stakeholder group. And then, of course, understanding exactly where you are and what you're dealing with will result in clearly a variant roadmap. Every FM operation, even within the same organization, can have subtle nuances, different tools they're working with, different assets they're working with. So in this regard, a clear understanding of exactly where you find yourself, and that would be even in the context of skills, competencies, what a piece of technology will ultimately be a different commodity to two different teams, maybe subtle, maybe not so subtle. So understanding how you really support all parts and all aspects of the journey is also really critical to get understood at the beginning. And then once you understand where you're trying to get to, who needs to go with you, and where you currently are, that gives you a really good almost foundation to then evaluate the how. Do you take the high road? Do you take the low road, as it were? I'm not going to break out in the song. You'll all be happy to hear. But the options then are founded. You understand how each of these different potential journeys will impact on the operating model, and sometimes the lesser ambitious route, but that brings less challenge or turbulence on the journey, may be the right thing for you and your operation. A lot of the time, clearly, what we're here to do is provide a service to our demand organization. And if your digital transformation is going to make their life or lives really challenged for 6 months, then that's kind of your core value proposition out the window for a long period of time. So some things have to happen, some things are optional, may slow progress, but the idea of directing the journey is FM brings that wraparound, that holistic perspective to mean that whatever options chosen has been validated against where you find yourself and who you need to move through this with. And then once you've got that clear understanding, we get to a point where you can start to build something, and that roadmap would naturally flow out of now a very well understood landscape that you can, as I say, communicate with and live with. And as with any changeable landscape, some of that roadmap itself may change as you iterate and evolve through the roadmap. But again, the roadmap becomes a living document that you'll never really walk away from. And it'll be something that will become a very powerful tool, both to support your business cases, but also to, again, play into that broader organizational intent and change programs. So that then, I think at this point, you have a plan. May not be assigned, may not be actioned, but you have a really clear, concise plan that you can communicate, live with, and work with. And then we're into much more familiar territory where we can break this down into project teams, assign it to individuals, and start going into very much that project management type space. But with the precursors of laying these clear foundations and getting the organizational and operational alignments, change, albeit still contains its challenges, you now can move through that change together, and also people can understand where you're trying to get to and for what reason. So some of those training initiatives and upskilling aspects can be now targeted collectively, with people understanding, why on earth am I having to do this? So that kind of moves us into you may not have a defined information model at this point in time, but really what we've just walked through gives you many kind of elements of what you would find or want to find inside such a thing. So we're obviously moving towards a kind of, probably for most, an environment familiar to the BIM practitioners in the audience, which is obviously in information management terms, the probably the most common term. But of course, the facility management information requirements sit beyond simply the building. As we're in the operational phase, we're looking maybe more so at service and maybe more so at outcomes. So things like whole life carbon, and moving into things like ESG, environment, social and governance kind of considerations. So the information model, I think, if you maybe haven't had to build it to get to the point of directing the journey, it's still a very powerful initiative to consider as supporting you in that clear communication and that clear directional instruct that you share with everyone. There's a lot of great guidance in the UK that came out of initially the Centre for Digital Built Britain, but now is in the likes of the Digital Twin Hub, and so on. And whether it's your organizational information requirements, your asset information requirements, projects, so on and so forth, all of these things just help tell a very clear story, help build very tangible business plans, help de-risk the change, help increase and maximize the return of investment. And each of these points are, I think, just turbocharges the FM team and its abilities. Doesn't come without its own challenges to first set up, maintain, and ultimately live with. And as I said at the beginning, becoming data driven isn't simply put some IoT on a wall. It obviously is far more complex and needs really tied into your operating model. But an information model can be a very effective way pre any system work to start to get an understanding of how you should operate with any technology, IoT, AI, IWMSs, doesn't matter. They all obviously act on information. And I think the power of, particularly for a facility management operation in practice, to own their information model is it's absolutely vendor agnostic, and it can very clearly allow you to control your ecosystem for the reasons you need it to be, and it can also inform things like tenders and contractual documentation, because you absolutely understand what you're looking to get from the application or the technology, and therefore that can be factored into any of your actual transactional documents. So I think this is why this has got its own slide. In the broader world, we in the UK have a group called NEMA. We do a lot of work around this space, looking to bring trustworthy and robust information into the sector. But it's certainly an initiative that a digital maturity program can leverage to really help steer your ship through that journey. Again, it's a validated landscape that really dictates the parameters, the needs, and the skills that interface across all of what your operation does. As I say, completely agnostic to any particular vendor. So to my mind, it empowers the FM quite a degree to be able to then have a conversation with HR, have a conversation with IT, have a conversation with C-suite, and know that this model has your back. So the first two slides were where we start and how we journey, but now we're looking at the measurement itself. So I mentioned earlier on the IWFM PSF, Professional Standards Framework, and that's very much around a functional view of the FM function as a macrocosm, and then it steps down into these sub-elements, which allows you to align it to your actual practice and the functions you would have in your teams that you would operate with. So when considering how we would go about trying to, I guess, how to eat the elephant, if you know that's saying, but how to take one piece at a time into something that would really work for any FM operation, then the natural place to go was the management system standard, which from an ISO capacity is called ISO 41001, and facility management has its own category A standard, which is the management system standards. And what you can see on the screen just now is really the structure of how to consider an FM operation and how it plays into ultimately its own demand organization. So what this really afforded was, if we could look at the functional elements on one side and the hierarchical elements on the other, then where these two frameworks interjected with each other, that gave us a maturity matrix that really, no matter what part of the operational hierarchy you were looking at, you could align that to the sub-functional capacities. And then across that grid, not only was this a maturity matrix that could encompass all FM operations, but it now provided a very comprehensive matrix that allowed or allows you to really start to get into now the software, the data, the technology conversation, and look at where these applications ultimately flow through your operation and in what way, with what teams. The matrix itself could actually, inside the matrix, go to very, very sophisticated levels. We've deliberately refrained from going too deep and mapping to too high a level, but the possibilities now allow a very deep and comprehensive view, which could start to handle the nuances of skills versus IT products versus process requirements, so on and so forth. At the moment, what we landed with is a more aggregative point of view, but certainly the matrix has the ability to go to whatever needs or whatever alignment that your FM operation required, basically. So this really set the scene, gave us a platform to deal to break the conversation down for any facility manager with any FM operation or workplace professional, and from that's where the one step at a time comes in. So different initiatives will have different challenges, different resource commitments, different economic factors. And in this way, being able to look at one versus the other in the context of the whole can lead to not only targeting the right areas, but the most effective to then flow into that changeable roadmap. Because it's probably unlikely that anyone would be looking to change everything in one go. So the fact that there are going to be iterations in your digital maturity plans is probably an inevitable. So where we now have this matrix, we had to measure, and being able to, in the aggregated sense, inside this matrix, look at a level 1 to 5. As I say, these maturity levels could be subdivided within the matrix for sure, but at the moment, as we have it in the good practice guide, we've got these 5 levels, which are derived from UK government and the way that they view data itself as a national concern. So this is hopefully language that, again, people are used to, and if they go into anything in the public sector or any of the national initiatives, then this is, again, the kind of language that you're going to see. So when you get to that business case, when you get to that C-suite type conversation, you're talking a common language, you're talking a governmental type language, and you're able to convey why you're trying to do what you're trying to do, at what cost, for what reason, and what benefit. I think these 5 ratings, whether you have leveraged the language used by UK government or not, these 5 levels are quite a common thing. But you can see in the sort of bullet points some of the properties that you can leverage to make that evaluation. I think what's quite powerful in the matrix is when you look to implement a new innovation or a new technology, the chances are it won't just be one part of your operation that will feel the benefits or the impact of doing such an endeavor. So that's again where the matrix brings in a real bit of power, is you're able to understand all those groups, all those stakeholders, and you can quite concisely visually represent that, who's to go on this journey, and also in what way. Particularly if you're running with an information model, then you would also be able to explain, down to the individual process, what parts of it are going to change and what technologies at what point in that process, that workflow, are you expecting the change to occur. And again, with any change, the clearer you can make it and the more support you can give to those impacted, typically the smoother and the easier that process will unfold with. So you can see a little snippet. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to have a look at the document itself. But you can see again a little highlight here of what you end up getting in the document, and a nice double page spread. So it can be kind of, even the beginning of your journey can be done with what's been provided in a pencil. It's very clear on how to work with it. I'm not advocating pencils, but certainly there's nothing kind of standing in your way. I think when you get up the levels of maturity, this sitting inside a database and becoming that live environment backed with your own corporate details and probably some more of those inner workings and the things that wouldn't come as a IWFM guidance, you can have mapped into that. So whole life carbon would be, clearly one of those things that could be modeled in. But really, to get going, a pencil, this practice guide, and then a series of meetings to flow into directing the digital journey as we spoke of earlier. So the final slide for what I'm going to walk through today, and then we'll get into more of the conversation, is then how to apply it. And this is really just, you now have your understandings, you now have where you're trying to go and who you're trying to take with you. And like I said earlier on, this is more typical kind of project management space. So I won't labor too much on this because I think for most of us, this is a day job activity. But again, it's about putting that framework in place to mean that a lot of the progress, the objectives, the next steps are there for people to access readily, understand quickly, and therefore make the project and the process a smoother affair. And I think with anyone that's started to get success with these projects, you all of a sudden go from having to present an opportunity that you believe will bring about results and convince your CFO to trust you because maybe the statistics haven't ran for enough years to give empirical evidence that this is going to guarantee a return, all of a sudden to 2 or 3 wins and the CFO's hunting you down, where's your next idea? Because I think all of us know when you look at the broadest organizational challenges, cost centers, and areas for optimization, FM and workplace, when it gets it right, plays into the very heart of the organization, and our impact can be felt all across the entire corporate space. So when we do get it right and we digitize well, we can absolutely change experiences and certainly turn CFOs' heads. So that's my final slide. I'm going to hand back to Sophie now. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Gordon. And for those wondering, yes, the slides will be available after the conversation. They will be on the website in the next few days, but also later on we'll put up the QR code to the guidance piece because that's where most of the information was drawn on. Eric, I would like to invite you to the conversation and to really try and keep it as interactive as possible for the audience. We're going to go straight into a poll. So our first poll will focus on whether the audience is driving the conversation and planning towards digital transformation and maturity in your organization. Now, we can't vote, even though a few of us are tempted, but the audience can also make the box bigger. You have that control yourself if you've got trouble reading the smaller font. So if everyone could please fill in the poll number 1, and then we will go to the results immediately, and we'll kick off the conversation around that. Drum roll. Ooh, that's a pretty even split. That's interesting. Eric, you're off mute. You're ready to comment.
Yeah. Well, I think first to start with, or also towards Gordon, I think, and to IWFM in general, I think the digitization topic and digital maturity topic is a very, very important topic, and actually a theme that's getting more relevant as we speak today. So this 50-50 thing is a good thing, and it's a bad thing at the same time. I guess there's still a lot to win. What I would like to add to what Gordon has been talking about is that digitization actually has the potential to change any of the services that we provide ourselves as a profession. Because Gordon basically made a mention to it. I would just like to basically illustrate it by a very simple example, and that is the digital workplace. So as we went into the COVID situation, the acceleration of digital means to work and collaborate, of course, was accelerated hugely. And now we are in a situation where we see basically with in a lot of markets where you have this conversation on going back to the office. What's the capacity we need? What kind of offices, physical offices, do we need in order to complement the digital? And my question to this in this realm, in this context is, are we as FM and workplace professionals defining the digital workplace as part of our strategy, or are we basically putting it in the hands of the IT community, the IT people of our companies to basically provide us with the Zooms and the Microsoft stuff? And I think this is very fundamental because it's really embedded in a digitization strategy around workplace, just as an example. So it's not just about creating more efficient, because I think there's all great things in terms of improved decision making, increased efficiency, better experience, but it's also impacting the product or the service that we're providing ourselves. It changes the fashion of it, its make. And I think that's really interesting, you know, to have that conversation internal to your organization. What kind of impact does it have in the terms of how we should basically define our own product and services internally?
Brilliant. Thank you, Eric. Gordon, I've got some questions lined up, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to Eric's challenge.
I'll be quick. I think it's interesting seeing the split, and obviously the maturity framework was created with a viewpoint of being leveraged by people making the decision, but it could quite easily also be leveraged by people not part of the decision to show why they should be.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to the other half of the audience to whether there's parts or elements of what is in this guidance that they could actually use to. I think it plays on what Eric just said. Is sometimes IT makes a decision and you're left with the outcomes of that decision, whether you like it or not. But maybe this would not force is maybe too strong a word, but allow you to get involved in the conversation by showing why that makes organizational sense.
Right, thank you for that. That's really interesting because I probably ought to change my next questions. But I'm going to stick with it and then we'll pivot a little bit. Why should organizations go on this journey?
Why? You mean FM organizations in general?
Well, we'll pivot to FM while
Yeah.
I take the lead after.
My simple answer would be to stay relevant. And that's basically, it sounds harsh probably, but I think this is fundamental to future quality of service, future ability to respond to things that change in the organization you work for. Because the thing is, this is a framework around digitization of our activities in FM real estate. At the same time, the organization that you work for is digitizing in their prime process as well. So you need to link up to that. You can't be left behind like, oh, these are the guys who still do everything on paper or something, you know, just to make it black and white. You are part of that organization you work for. They have a digitization strategy undoubtedly or developing it for the prime processes. So basically go with the flow, you know? And so it's for me, it's fundamental for the survival of your own FM activities within the context of your own organization.
Gordon?
It is value. I mean, obviously, because we built this around the operation and its function set, you could relabel it and say the operational value journey. We've taken a focus of digital because so much of how you change these days orientates around that. but this same methodology could be used to review your processes, going into what Eric was saying about your services and, really getting to the nuts and bolts of your workplace FM strategies. So yeah, I think that staying relevant, but increasing your opportunities and your value, all of these things are for any of us. I mean, look what smartphones have done to this world in a very short period of time, and this you haven't seen anything yet.
Yes, well, and as a policy person, I would obviously say to help demonstrate you comply with a whole host of requirements from a legal perspective. But I think we probably should go back to the next poll, please, and get a little bit of a view of where the audience is engaged. So poll number 2 effectively is, are you currently engaged in one or more projects in your organization linked to digitization? And what type of areas do these projects relate to? And you can answer more questions than one there. May we have the answer, please? Noting them.
Great.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, there's a clear contender there. Obviously, a lot of people are, I hope everyone's had time to review those results. Right, to the question, what are your reflections when you see those?
Well,
Gordon, let me start with you this time round.
yeah, sorry.
Well, I think obviously you've seen the asset management maintenance at the top end. I mean, the yes or no, you can see that it's a complex, changeable space. People are having to deal with multiple, and that doesn't surprise me. FM's such a broad church. It's very difficult just to look at one initiative against the operating model. But I think in terms of then what are you focused in, that doesn't surprise me either, because if you look at digitizing assets, it's more of a mechanical function set with less moving parts, if you like. When you start looking at workplace, you have these really annoying things called humans and stuff like that, that come into the mix and certainly do not make it easier. But that's obviously the objectives of evolving your workplace, is to enhance our own experience of it. So I think it's what I kind of expected, but the dealing with multiple projects, the next question that comes into my mind is, in how are you harmonizing all those joint initiatives at the same time, or are they much? I mean, I'm not saying we're asking this, but or are people dealing with them quite in silos?
Eric, can we pivot your reaction a little bit and kind of also, in addition to giving your reaction, what are the key problems that you see most amongst your users?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's 67% of people said they are engaged in a project. So that's over the 49% that out of question 1. So there's some nuance to the first answer, I guess. I think what strikes me a little bit is I was looking at the sustainability. 50% of projects was around sustainability today. If I circle back to the big part of the conversation with Gordon, which is about data, what we see as a problem today that our clients are basically having to deal with today, and that's also for safety, by the way, it is that sustainability, you have actually 2 angles to it. One is the compliance, so regulations that you need to comply to, which is typically about reporting and stuff like that. And of course, the second area is, of course, a fundamental improvement of performance. Now, if you're looking at compliance, the problem of many of our clients today is that compliant reporting needs data, and data that needs to be traceable. So you can't just put together a report and basically put that into any governmental institution as, okay, this is my performance. And that basically fundamentally goes back to Gordon's story about the framework and data management. Because for that, when you need compliant report, like I know in the UK is with on a lot of building safety elements as well, you need to have the basic data available and inspectable in order to validate your report. Now that takes sincere data management, and that takes sincere good data strategy, how to get it, how to maintain it, how to get it into the right quality before you go and report on it, you know? So I think, I don't know the division of this 50% on sustainability, but I suspect a good part of that project will be about reporting or preparing for reporting, because you need to have that in your hands as well to make a plan for improvement anyway. So what's my current situation? How am I dealing on footprint of buildings and stuff like that? So, and the other thing, of course, Gordon already illuminated on that. Asset management is, of course, a suspect kind of thing. Workplace, I like the remark of Gordon. You get these animals like people in there, which are hard to handle. At the same time, they're the most important. You know, it's what you basically invest for, and their experience and their comfort and stuff like that. So. And that's even in terms of data, it is even more challenging, because how are you going to capture the real satisfaction? What's the definition of productivity? You know, how do you basically are going to express that? Can you express it in data? What do I need to know for that, and kind of thing? So there's a whole world opening up in terms of how you're going to think around data.
Well, Eric, we've got whole different sessions on workplace productivity, and actually we talked about quite a bit of that in the last webinar around well, productivity in the workplace and what that looks like in a post-pandemic world. Everything that we talk about, they're not short programs of work. They are quite big programs of change that need to take a holistic approach. So to make comprehensive change program, you need to have success. Well, you need to have a lot of support of stakeholders across the organization to make sure that the program in place will deliver on the different objectives. How do you take the narrative to the C-suite, especially when you don't have any data to begin with?
That's a question to me.
Well, you go for it, Eric.
Yeah, okay, I'll go for it. In my view, it starts with what is the shared set of problems that the organization that I work for and myself will recognize as something valuable to basically address. Because that's basically the starting point. If you want to create, let's say, who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders are typically parts of the organization, people who are confronted with a problem that needs to be addressed actually. If you don't have data, you might not have data yet, but there's typically a very good sense of what's really important in terms of problems to address for the organization. So if you start at the thinking by, okay, setting an agenda, where can I add value by addressing certain problems that is basically recognized within the organization, then you can make a plan. How am I going to get the data in order to get that, to have my zero situation in, and so on, and improve on that? And also the finance, of course. I think in general, the absence of data is a real impediment for addressing the C-suite in an effective way. I've been sitting in many, let's say, senior management meetings where people would provide, let's say, express their professional opinion. There would always be a kind of, okay, nice that you think so. If you come with a report on how things actually are, you basically make it an impersonal thing, but it's a more factual situation that you're going to present to C-suite or senior management, which they are very much more receptive to, because it's basically taking it out of a kind of framework of opinion. And that's the valid. So you will always be in a lesser situation when you can't, let's say, illustrate problems that you think you should address without data, underlying data, basically representing the effects of that situation. So it's a struggle, but I think I would always start with fundamental problems that are recognized, not only within your FM department, but also with your clients.
I'm mindful of time, so we're going to go straight to the next poll. If that will be poll number 4, and the guidance and the presentation that Gordon delivered earlier on talked about the different levels and what level do you think your organization is at, and you can only choose one. We have not started at all, and we are not exploring digital maturity. So we've allowed for the inclusion of everyone on this webinar to participate. Level 1, organization does not see data as valuable. Level 2, use of data is limited to specialist staff and data is seen as IT. Level 3, data and analytical literacy is valued in leadership roles as staff engagement with data extends beyond IT. Level 4, beginning to embed policies and practices across organization. And you don't need to rely on specialist support. And then level 5, where are we at? Can we see the results, please? That's really encouraging to see. Most people place themselves at level 3, with about 20% still at level 4 and 7% at level 5. Thoughts, Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of where I've felt things might be, maybe higher than, I guess. Maybe there's particular practices sitting in these brackets rather than the whole operational function being, there, because level 5 is really difficult to get to today. But yeah, I think that my comment would be it's great to see no one on the first 2. We are all on this journey. We should believe we're on this journey, and we should believe we can steer this ship as well. So, everyone at least feeling that they are part of this process is great.
Brilliant. We're going to go immediately to the last 2 polls, which will kind of give us a more rounded view around how people see their organization change and the barriers that stay in place. So how are you changing your organization towards digital maturity, and what are the barriers for not moving in this area? And you can answer with multiple choice for both questions. And yet again, we're not allowed to vote.
Sophie, while the audience is taking this poll, could I just make a very quick point? It was just on a previous point. The digital maturity doesn't need to be big efforts. The important thing is if you have the robust framework, a comprehensive framework, you can take about very small initiatives. So it could be a very cheap sensor on an asset, but the point is you know how you're going to use the data that comes out of that. And it's going back to what Eric said, you're not just selling opinion. You're able to sell a very clear business case that shows what's required, what you're going to do, and what that's going to become. And that, you get IoT sensors for £10 these days. So the spend could be low, but your ability to show the journey and the requirements of it may well be quite comprehensive. But I just wanted to make that point.
And point well made. Can we please see the results for those polls? That's interesting. The think from this, we can clearly see that leadership drive and that ambition to change operational management are clear leaders in this field, and the barriers are very evenly split. I think kind of also building on some of the responses that we got on the different levels, what is your experience? And that goes to both of you because you're both helping organizations in their journey around the connection to the IT department and the relationships that you see in place. Is it pretty joined up?
Who do you want us? Do you want Gordon?
Eric,
Yeah.
you go for it.
Well, it's not a given. I think it's a varied picture. I think it is getting closer. For organizations, certainly with FM organizations who have their eyes on digitization, the natural thing is there to basically work with your IT peers and information management peers on the other side. But having said that, there's always something that returns as a problem again to the FM and real estate organizations if the business is not their primary business. If you're working for an organization which has a different type of prime process, most of the IT capacity and concentration goes to the prime process. It's always kind of, let's fight for attention. And that's a problem. That's really a problem because if you develop your own digitization strategy for FM real estate services, you need their support, you need their engagement, you need basically a dual planning. Now, some of that can be helped if you basically reach out to elements that the IT and information management people are working with. For instance, I'm just making a very short call to Gordon's business, which is about AI, for instance. And what you will see, just as an example, that over the coming years, of course, the introduction of AI in business processes is going to be a theme. For that, you need very reliable, good data of your own corporation, of your own organization. Now, you will be part, if you're doing it smart, you as an FM department will be part of that effort because you're part of that organization. And then you link up in a very intrinsic way to IT and information management services within the company. But you have to find those touch paths, so to say, to basically put yourself in front of what's happening in the organization. But it is a problem, you know. And I don't see it fade away with the deficit of IT personnel on the shorter term.
Brilliant. Now, Gordon, I am going to change topic again because we had a little flurry of questions from the audience, both responding to the barrier question, and I think the point you actually made, or opposite to the point you made, because you made a point that you don't necessarily need large budgets. But we had 3, 4, 5 questions come in that were all talking that budget is surely a key barrier, or should business case not made, therefore funds not be allocated, be a constraint. And a question around the missing link to financial limitations, because if there's a lack of leadership, they are finding that also comes with a lack of wanting to commit to digital maturity and migration. Is Gordon, I'd like to give you the opportunity to kind of reinforce some of the points you were making.
Nothing's for free. The point of this is if you do a good job, then you will bring a return into your function, unlike many other efforts. So that still doesn't mean it's free, but as you start to compile that return, then ultimately that frees up the ability for you to be more ambitious. But like I say, you know, if there's no spend available, then even £10 is beyond budget. So completely noted on that point. But you've got to, that's the point of a maturity journey. You know, walk in the steps that you can live with, and you will get there. And it might take you 100 steps rather than 10. That's okay. You got to go at the pace you can live with and that your budgets can afford. But I do think it's obviously a consideration, you know, clearly. But I would say it's a manageable one if you align it in a good strategy.
No, and the point you make is a good one, because ultimately you put the responsibility back on the senior team about whether they want to remain relevant, and they give you that scope for room for movement.
Can I add something to that, Sophie?
Sure. Yes.
When we talk about investments and budgets, it's about finance. So the first response we see often is to think about ROI. In some cases, that's hard for an FM environment to basically calculate on just on a financial basis. If you translate it to a business case where you're going to add elements that are of a non-financial nature, you have a bigger playing field in order to address the reasoning why you would need a certain investment in order to basically move ahead in this field. And that's careful thinking. You know, it's have to think about the non-financial benefits next to the financial ones.
Well, that's another point well made, and it's one that we see most often return, including in areas like sustainability as well, that you really need to look at the wider benefits for you as an organization and your brand and your reputation, amongst others. Now, we do need to close down because I'm running over time again. I always get too excited. But I want to ask as a last question what you get most excited about when helping organizations with their digital maturity journey. Gordon, do you want to go first?
Liberating FM professionals to provide more value add.
Short and sharp, snappy. Eric?
Becoming more strategic instead of operational. Really engaging with the organization's future and not just doing the day-to-day stuff.
Those are nice few points to land on. Right, we need to bring this discussion to a conclusion, and I would like to thank Gordon and Eric, of course, for their interesting contributions to this discussion. For those people wondering about the slides, they will be available, but here is the code, as we promised, of the guidance note that was recently published. The next slide will also show the code for our professional standards handbook, which is part of the matrix to assess your digital maturity. And as the last point of order, I have to bring to your attention that some of these elements will be discussed in greater detail with the all-fabulous Gordon Mitchell, who was your presenter today. And next week, Tuesday, from 12 till 1:30, it will be a 90-minute session. Please join us again for looking at some of the questions raised today in more detail for more hands-on takeaways of this. So thank you, Gordon and Eric, for today. We've also got a CPD number for the audience. The audience, thank you very much for sticking with us, even though we're running slightly over time. Thank you, Eric, to Planon as well for supporting us with the delivery of this document. We hope it really is going to be a game changer for our sector and our members. And I would like to thank Lucy and Kaya as well. You might not have seen them, but they were our webinar support today, and without them, things would not run as smoothly. So thank you. And hope to see you all very soon, and many of you next week, when we'll take a slightly different angle at this particular challenge. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.